The doors of the Grand Assembly Hall weighed more than a small starship. They were carved from the bones of a dead world, polished black and threaded with gold that had been mined from 1,000 different asteroids. When they opened, they made no sound at all. That silence was meant to remind visitors of their own smallness. Ambassador David Mercer stood before those doors and felt his heart beating so hard he was sure the alien guards could hear it. Behind him stood only 4 other humans, 5 representatives of Earth, about to face the judgment of an empire that controlled 30,000 star systems. The doors parted. Light flooded out, so bright it hurt his eyes. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Hegemony stretched for nearly 1 kilometer in every direction. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness high above, dotted with floating platforms where observers watched from species that could not survive in standard atmosphere. The walls were lined with thousands of seats, arranged in rising tiers, and every single seat was filled. David had studied the briefings. He knew what to expect, but nothing could have prepared him for actually seeing it. Beings of every shape and size stared down at the human delegation. Some had too many eyes. Others had no eyes at all. There were creatures made of living crystal, beings that existed as clouds of connected particles, massive insectoid forms that clicked and chittered in languages humans had no hope of understanding. The air itself seemed to hum with the weight of their attention. At the center of the hall, raised on a platform of pure white stone, sat the 7 hierarchs. These were the rulers of the hegemony, the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Each one represented a founding species of the great alliance that had dominated space for over 12,000 years. The first hierarch was a Dominari, a creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a mantis, with limbs that seemed to fold through dimensions humans could not perceive. Its voice came from everywhere at once when it spoke. Humans of Earth, you stand before the Grand Assembly of the Hegemony of United Worlds. You have been summoned to answer for your crimes. David forced himself to walk forward. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. 5 humans, walking across a floor that had seen the fates of empires decided, approaching a tribunal that had never once shown mercy to those it judged guilty. We are here, first hierarch, David said. His voice did not shake. He was proud of that. 3 cycles ago, a human vessel entered the restricted zone of Kalos Prime. This zone has been declared sacred by hegemony law for 9,000 years. No species may enter without authorization. Your vessel not only entered, it landed on the surface and remained for 6 standard days before departing. The second hierarch, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell, added its voice. The punishment for violation of sacred space is the complete quarantine of the offending species. All contact severed. All trade ended. All protection withdrawn. Your 17 colony worlds would be left defenseless against any who wish to claim them. Do you deny these charges? The first hierarch demanded. David took a breath. This was the moment everything depended on. Earth had been preparing for this confrontation since they first learned of the accusation 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of frantic research, desperate planning, and one incredibly dangerous mission to find the truth. We do not deny that our vessel entered the restricted zone, David said clearly. We admit this freely. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several species began shouting what were probably insults in their native languages. The first hierarch raised a limb, and silence fell instantly. You confess. Then there is nothing to discuss. The penalty is clear. However, David continued, raising his voice, we deny that the zone should be restricted at all, and we have evidence to prove it. The silence that followed was different, heavier, more dangerous. You dare, the third hierarch hissed. This one was reptilian, covered in scales that shifted color with its mood. Right now, those scales were darkening to deep red. You dare to challenge a law that has stood for 9 millennia? The law was created to protect sacred ground, David replied. Ground where the founders are said to have first achieved unity, where the hegemony itself was born. We respect that history, but we discovered something on Kalos Prime that the hegemony needs to know. Nothing you found could justify this violation. Even if what we found proves the entire basis of the restricted zone is a lie. The assembly exploded into chaos. Beings screamed, roared, and made sounds humans had no words for. Security forces around the edges of the hall raised weapons. The 7 hierarchs exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes in seconds. "Explain yourself," the first hierarch commanded. "Quickly, before I lose patience entirely." David pulled a small device from his pocket and held it up. "Permission to display evidence?" A long pause, then a nod. The device activated, projecting a hologram into the air above David's head. It showed readings, sensor data, geological surveys. And at the center, an image that made the entire assembly fall silent. "The sacred site on Kalos Prime is not what you believe it to be," David said. "It was never where the founders achieved unity. It was something else entirely. Something your ancestors wanted hidden so badly that they created a religion around protecting it." The image showed a structure buried deep beneath the surface of Kalos Prime. A structure that was clearly artificial, clearly ancient, and clearly not built by any species currently in the hegemony. "This is a weapon," David continued. "A weapon capable of destroying stars. Your founders did not achieve peace there. They achieved victory. They used this weapon to annihilate an enemy species so completely that no trace of them remained in any historical record. Then they sealed the site and declared it sacred so that no one would ever discover what they had done." The third hierarch was on its feet. "These are lies. Fabrications created by a primitive species trying to escape justice. They are not lies. Every piece of data we collected can be independently verified. Send your own teams to Kalos Prime. Dig where we dug. You will find exactly what we found." David looked directly at the first hierarch. The hegemony was not founded on unity. It was founded on genocide. And the weapon that made it possible is still functional, still waiting beneath the surface of your most sacred world. "Even if this were true," the first hierarch said slowly, "it would not excuse your violation of our laws." "No, but it changes the conversation, does it not? You summoned us here to be punished for trespassing. Now you have to decide whether you want the galaxy to know what we found." David paused, letting that sink in. "We have transmitted copies of our data to secure locations across human space. If anything happens to Earth or our colonies, that data will be released every news network, every independent world. Every species that has ever questioned whether the hegemony truly represents unity or merely dominance." The silence stretched. David could feel sweat running down his back, but he kept his expression calm. "You are threatening us," the first hierarch said. There was something new in his voice, something that might have been respect. "I am offering you a choice," David replied. "You can punish humanity and watch your carefully constructed history unravel. Or you can acknowledge that we have discovered something important, something that affects the entire galaxy, and work with us to decide what to do about it. And what do humans want? What do you hope to gain from this blackmail?" David shook his head. "It is not blackmail. It is a warning. That weapon on Kalos Prime is ancient, but our scientists believe it is still capable of firing. Anyone who gains access to it could destroy entire star systems. The hegemony has spent 9,000 years pretending it does not exist. We are suggesting that perhaps it is time to actually deal with the problem instead of hiding from it." The first hierarch turned to consult with the other hierarchs. Their conversation was silent, conducted through means humans could not perceive, but their body language spoke volumes. Some were angry. Others seemed afraid. A few looked almost thoughtful. Finally, the first hierarch turned back to face the human delegation. The assembly will recess to consider this new information. Humans, you will remain as guests of the hegemony until a decision is reached. You will be treated with courtesy, but you will not be permitted to leave. It was not a victory. Not yet, but it was not the immediate destruction they had feared either. David nodded. We accept your hospitality, first hierarch, and we hope that when you have considered everything, you will see that humanity wants the same thing the hegemony claims to want. A galaxy at peace. A future where no one needs weapons that can destroy stars. As the guards led the human delegation away, David allowed himself one small moment of relief. They had survived the first round. The real battle was just beginning. Behind them, 30,000 years of carefully constructed lies had begun to crumble, and the galaxy would never be the same. The quarters they gave the humans were luxurious by any standard. Rooms carved from living crystal, furniture that adjusted to their bodies, food synthesizers programmed with thousands of earth dishes. It was all very polite, very comfortable, and very clearly a prison. David Mercer stood at the window, looking out at the hegemony's capital city. It spread across the entire surface of an artificial world, a planet-sized station that served as the seat of galactic government. Billions of beings lived here, worked here, and believed in the system that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. A system built on a lie. Lieutenant Commander Elena Voss came to stand beside him. She was the military officer on their delegation, a woman who had seen combat on 3 frontier worlds before being assigned to diplomatic duty. Her face was calm, but David could see the tension in her shoulders. Our guards have been doubled, she said quietly, and I am detecting jamming signals that are blocking our communication implants. We are completely cut off from Earth. Expected, David replied. They cannot afford to let us communicate freely. Not with what we know. Do you think they will kill us? David considered the question seriously. I do not know. The hegemony has rules about harming diplomatic personnel, but what we have done goes beyond normal diplomatic incidents. We have threatened to expose their founding myth as a mass murder. So, probably yes, probably maybe. David turned away from the window. Which is why we need to move quickly. Have you found what I asked for? Elena nodded and pulled out a small device. The station's communication network is heavily encrypted, but I found a weakness. There is a maintenance channel that is not as well protected. If we can access a terminal directly, I can send a burst transmission to our backup ship waiting outside the system. Good. We need to... A chime sounded. The door to their quarters slid open, revealing a figure that made both humans tense. The being that entered was unlike anything they had seen in the assembly hall. It was humanoid in basic shape, but its skin was the color of burnished copper, and its eyes were pools of liquid silver. It wore robes of pure white, and it moved with a grace that seemed almost painful to watch. I am Counselor Torvex, the being said. Its voice was musical, each word carrying undertones that resonated in ways human ears struggled to process. I have been assigned to oversee your welfare during your stay. Oversee, David repeated. You mean guard? Torvex smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. I mean ensure that no harm comes to you, Ambassador. There are many in the hegemony who are not pleased with your revelations. I am here to protect you from them. And who protects us from you? A fair question. Torvex moved further into the room, examining the furnishings with apparent interest. I am Velanthi. My species joined the hegemony only 2,000 years ago. We are not one of the founding races. We have no stake in protecting their secrets. Elena's hand drifted toward her concealed weapon. Why are you telling us this? Because I believe you. I have accessed the data you presented to the assembly. Your evidence is genuine. The weapon exists. The founders committed genocide. Torvex turned to face them directly. And I believe this information must be shared with the galaxy, regardless of what the hierarchs decide. David felt a surge of hope that he immediately suppressed. This could easily be a trap. The hegemony sending a sympathetic face to gain their trust, to learn their plans. Why would you risk your position to help us? Because the hegemony I serve is supposed to stand for unity and justice. If it was founded on massacre and lies, then it needs to become something better, or it does not deserve to exist. Torvex's. Silver eyes met David's, and because my own species was nearly destroyed by the hegemony's expansion 3,000 years ago, we survived only by surrendering everything we were and becoming what they wanted us to be. If there was a weapon that could have saved us, that could have forced them to treat us as equals instead of subjects, I wonder if our history might have been different. You want revenge. I want truth. Revenge would be satisfying, but it would change nothing. Truth can transform everything. David exchanged glances with Elena. The risk was enormous. If Torvex was playing them, they would lose any chance of completing their mission. But if the counselor was genuine, they had just gained an ally inside the hegemony's own government. What do you propose? David asked carefully. Torvex moved to the window, looking out at the same view David had been contemplating moments earlier. The hierarchs are divided. 3 wish to execute you and suppress the information completely. 2 want to negotiate and find a way to control the narrative. 2 more are genuinely uncertain, torn between protecting the hegemony's image and confronting an uncomfortable truth. Which group will win? Normally, the suppressors would dominate. But your threat to release the data complicates their calculation. They know that killing you would only guarantee the exposure they fear. Torvex turned back. However, there is another factor you do not know about. What factor? You are not the first to discover the weapon on Kalos Prime. The words hung in the air. David felt his stomach drop. Explain. 40 years ago, a research vessel from an unaffiliated species stumbled upon the same site. They were eliminated before they could share their findings, but 1 crew member escaped. He spent the rest of his life trying to expose the truth, but no one believed him. He was dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, a madman. Torvex paused. His name was Drevin Kallis. He died 3 years ago, still fighting, still believing that someday the truth would come out. Kallis, Elena said slowly. The planet is named after him? No, the planet was named by the founders. Kallis discovered that his family name came from an ancient word in his species' language, a word that meant Death World. He believed it was a sign. He may have been right. David processed this information rapidly. You are saying that the hegemony has killed before to protect this secret. What makes our situation different? Numbers, Torvex replied simply. Drevin Kallis was one being with no resources and no leverage. You represent an entire species with 17 colonies and the backing of a military that has been unexpectedly effective against hegemony forces in the border. Skirmishes of the past decade. Killing you creates a war. Wars attract attention. Attention leads to questions. So they have to find another way. Yes, and that is where the danger lies. The hierarchs who favor suppression are not stupid. If they cannot kill you directly, they will find indirect methods. Accidents, medical emergencies. Perhaps a sudden outbreak of hostility from one of the assembly species who believes you have insulted their honor. Elena stepped forward. How do we protect ourselves? You do not. Not alone. Torvex reached into his robes and produced a small crystal. This contains access codes to secure communication channels throughout the station. It also contains information about the hierarchs who are undecided, what they value, what they fear. If you can convince them to side with transparency, you will have a majority. You want us to lobby the judges while we are on trial? I want you to survive long enough to ensure the truth cannot be buried again. Torvex pressed the crystal into David's hand. The undecided hierarchs are 4th and 6th. The 4th is a melody, a species that prizes knowledge above all else. Convince her that the truth has value regardless of its consequences, and she will support you. The 6th is a Thrandux, a warrior species that despises deception. Show him that the Founder's lies dishonor everything the hegemony claims to stand for, and he will demand accountability. David looked at the crystal in his hand. It was warm, almost alive, pulsing with data he could not get access. Why are you doing this? Really? If you are caught helping us, your career is over. Your life might be over. Torvex smiled that too sharp smile again. I told you. I believe in truth. And I believe that humanity may be exactly what this galaxy needs right now. A species young enough to still believe in justice. Bold enough to challenge power. Clever enough to find leverage where none should exist. Or foolish enough to get ourselves killed. Perhaps. But foolishness and courage often look the same from the outside. Only the outcome determines which word history uses. The counselor moved toward the door, then paused. You have perhaps 6 hours before the first attempt on your lives. I suggest you use that time wisely. Then Torvex was gone, leaving the humans, alone with a crystal full of secrets and a deadline that was already ticking down. David looked at Elena. 6 hours. We need to reach the 4th hierarch first. The Melodi value knowledge, which means they might be willing to meet with us if we frame our request properly. And if this is all a trap? If Torvex is leading us into an ambush? Then we die trying to do the right thing instead of dying helplessly in our quarters. David clutched the crystal tighter. Either way, we are already committed. The only direction is forward. Elena nodded slowly, then pulled out her weapon and checked its charge. Forward it is. Let us go make some new friends. They left their quarters 5 minutes later, moving through corridors that suddenly seemed full of shadows and threats. Somewhere in the massive station, beings were planning their deaths. Somewhere else, potential allies waited to be convinced. The game had changed, and humanity was playing for keeps. The Chamber of Records was not on any official map of the station. It existed in a section that had been sealed for thousands of years, accessible only to those with the highest clearance levels. According to Torvex's data, the 4th hierarch spent 3 hours there every day, studying ancient texts and artifacts that most beings did not even know existed. David and Elena had been walking for 20 minutes, following a route that took them through maintenance tunnels and abandoned corridors. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every distant sound made them freeze. But so far, no one had tried to stop them. This is too easy, Elena muttered. Where are the guards? Where is the security? Maybe Torvex cleared the path for us. Or maybe we are walking into exactly what they want. Comforting thoughts. They reached a door that looked ancient, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift when David looked at them directly. According to their information, this was the entrance to the Chamber of Records. Somewhere beyond it, the 4th hierarch waited. David pressed his palm against the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the symbols flared with light, and the door dissolved into mist. The chamber beyond was vast and completely dark, except for a single light source at its center. As David's eyes adjusted, he began to make out shapes in the darkness. Shelves reaching up toward an invisible ceiling, filled with objects he could not identify. The air smelled of age and dust and something else, something almost electrical. "Come forward, humans." The voice came from the light. David walked toward it. Elena closed behind, passing through aisles of artifacts that seemed to watch them with invisible eyes. The fourth hierarch was waiting in a pool of golden light, surrounded by floating screens covered in alien text. She was Melody, which meant she had no physical body in the traditional sense. Instead, she existed as a pattern of energy, a living thought given form through technology, so advanced it might as well be magic. Her presence manifested as a shifting geometric shape, constantly changing, never quite settling into any fixed form. "You should not be here," the hierarch said. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The Assembly has not authorized contact with the accused." "We know," David replied. "We came anyway. We believe you want to hear what we have to say." "What makes you believe that?" "You are Melody. Your species values knowledge above all other things. You have spent your entire existence gathering information, understanding the universe, seeking truth." David gestured at the chamber around them. "This place exists because someone believed that some knowledge was too important to destroy, even if it was dangerous. We are offering you more of that kind of knowledge." The geometric shape pulsed, colors shifting through spectrums human eyes could barely perceive. The other hierarchs would say that some knowledge is too dangerous to share. That stability requires certain truths to remain hidden. "And you disagree?" "I have studied the history of 1,000 civilizations, human. I have seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct, ideas spread and transform across millennia." The hierarch's form stabilized slightly, becoming something almost recognizable. "In all that history, I have never seen a lie that protected more than it destroyed. Secrets rot. They corrupt everything they touch. The truth you have discovered about Kalos Prime will come out eventually. The only question is whether it emerges in a controlled way that allows for healing, or violently, in a way that tears the hegemony apart. Then you support releasing the information?" "I support understanding it first." The screens around the hierarch shifted, displaying the same data David had presented to the Assembly. "Your evidence is genuine. I have verified it through 17 independent analytical frameworks. The weapon exists. The genocide occurred. The founders built their unity on the ashes of a species they erased from history. Then you will vote to acknowledge the truth?" The hierarch's form flickered, and David sensed something like hesitation. "Knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing. I know the truth, but knowing what to do with that truth is more complicated." Elena stepped forward. "With respect, hierarch, what is complicated about it?" "The hegemony claims to stand for justice and unity. It was founded on murder and lies. Either those principles mean something, or they do not. Young one, you think in straight lines. The universe rarely cooperates with such simplicity." The hierarch moved closer, her geometric form looming over them. "If we expose the founders' crimes, we do not simply change history. We destroy the foundation that holds 30,000 worlds together. The hegemony is not just a government. It is an idea, a shared belief that beings from vastly different species can work together toward common goals. That idea has maintained peace for 12,000 years. What happens when we tell 30,000 worlds that the idea was built on a lie? They deserve to know." "Perhaps. But deserving and surviving are different things. Some of those worlds are held together only by their belief in the hegemony's legitimacy. Remove that belief, and old conflicts resurface. Wars that have been dormant for millennia could reignite. Billions could die." David felt the weight of that argument. He had been so focused on exposing the truth that he had not fully considered the consequences of success. "So what do you suggest?" he asked quietly. The hierarch's form shifted again, becoming something almost sympathetic. I suggest that we are asking the wrong question. The question is not whether to reveal the truth. The truth will emerge regardless of what we decide. The question is what we do afterward. How do we rebuild belief in something real? How do we create a hegemony that deserves its power, instead of one that merely inherited it through ancient crimes? You want to reform the entire galactic government? I want to save it, which sometimes requires changing it beyond recognition. The hierarch moved to one of her floating screens and made a gesture. An image appeared, showing the weapon beneath Kalos Prime in detail David had never seen before. This device was created by a species called the Verith. They were older than any species currently in the hegemony. They had achieved things we still do not understand. When the founders encountered them, they were terrified. The Verith were different in ways that made cooperation impossible. So the founders stole their greatest weapon and used it against them. How do you know this? The records were supposed to be destroyed. Nothing is ever truly destroyed. Information persists, hiding in the spaces between official histories. I have spent 3,000 years collecting those fragments, piecing together what really happened. The hierarch turned back to face them. The weapon on Kalos Prime is not just a planet killer. It is a reality editor. It can erase things from existence so completely that they never were. The Verith built it as a tool for construction, for creating new possibilities. The founders perverted it into a weapon of annihilation. David felt cold. Can it be used again? Unknown. The founders damaged it when they used it against the Verith. It has been dormant for 12,000 years. But dormant is not the same as dead. The hierarch's form flickered. This is why I hesitate. If the truth comes out, others will seek that weapon. Others will try to claim its power. The hegemony, for all its flaws, has kept that weapon contained simply by making its location sacred. Remove that protection, and we invite chaos. Unless we remove the weapon entirely. Both the hierarch and Elena turned to stare at David. The weapon is the problem, David continued, thinking rapidly. Not the secret, not the lie. The weapon. As long as it exists, it is a threat. Someone will eventually find it, eventually try to use it. The only way to truly protect the galaxy is to destroy it. Impossible, the hierarch said. The weapon exists outside normal physics. Our technology cannot affect it. Your technology. But you said the Verith were more advanced than anything in the current hegemony. What about their technology? Silence. The floating screens around them flickered with data David could not read. There are fragments, the hierarch said slowly. Artifacts recovered from Verith sites over the millennia. Most are useless, their functions unknown. But some, she paused, some might contain the knowledge needed to disable or destroy the weapon. Then that is what we should be doing. Not arguing about whether to reveal a secret, but working together to eliminate the threat. David stepped forward. Help us. Help us find those artifacts, understand them, and use them to destroy the weapon. Then it will not matter if the truth comes out. There will be nothing left to fight over. The hierarch's form shifted through a dozen configurations in seconds, processing possibilities at speeds no organic. Mind could match. You are asking me to commit. Treason, she said finally. I am asking you to help save 30,000 worlds from a weapon that should never have existed. I am asking you to turn a 12,000-year-old mistake into an opportunity for real change. More silence. The chamber itself seemed to be holding its breath. The sixth hierarch, the fourth hierarch said at last, he must be part of this. The Thrandic's code of honor would demand his participation once he understands what is at stake. Then you will help us reach him? I will do more than that. The hierarch's form stabilized into something almost solid, almost humanoid. I will bring him here. and I will bring the artifacts that might hold the key to destroying the weapon. If we are going to commit treason, we should do it properly. David felt relief flooding through him. It was not victory, not yet, but it was progress. It was a chance. Thank you, Hierarch. Do not thank me yet, human. What we are about to attempt has never been done. We will be fighting against 12,000 years of inertia, against powers that will kill to protect their secrets, against a weapon that can erase us from existence if we fail. But you are still willing to try. The fourth Hierarch's form flickered with something that might have been amusement. As I said, I have studied history. I know that the greatest changes always begin with small groups of beings willing to risk everything for what they believe. Perhaps this is our moment. Perhaps this is when the galaxy finally grows up. She turned to her screens and began working. The sixth Hierarch will be here within the hour. I suggest you prepare yourselves. Convincing a Thrandux warrior to join a conspiracy is considerably harder than convincing a Melody scholar. David and Elena exchanged glances. They had won an ally. Now they had to win another, and somewhere in the darkness of the station, beings were still planning their deaths. The clock was still ticking. The sixth Hierarch arrived like a storm, entering a library. He was Thrandux, a species that had evolved for war on a world where everything was trying to kill everything else. His body was covered in natural armor, plates of bone and keratin that could deflect most energy weapons. His eyes were designed to track fast-moving prey across vast distances. When he walked, the ground seemed to tremble. What is the meaning of this? His voice was a rumble that David felt in his chest. I received a priority summons from the fourth Hierarch for secret matters. I arrived to find humans in the Chamber of Records. Explain, now. The fourth Hierarch's geometric form pulsed with calming colors. Thank you for coming, honored sixth. The humans have information that affects the security of the hegemony. Information that requires your particular expertise. My expertise is war. What could these soft creatures possibly know about war that would require my presence? David stepped forward, forcing himself not to flinch under the Thrandux's predatory gaze. We know about a weapon that could destroy everything the hegemony has built. And we know that certain Hierarchs are planning to kill us to keep that weapon secret. The sixth Hierarch went very still. For a being built for constant motion, it was deeply unsettling. Speak carefully, human. Accusations against Hierarchs are not made lightly. The weapon exists on Kalos Prime. It was built by a species called the Varith. The founders used it to commit genocide 12,000 years ago. The Hierarchs who want us dead are protecting this secret because they fear what will happen if the galaxy learns the truth. I know the story of Kalos Prime, sacred ground where the founders achieved unity. You are claiming this is a lie? We are claiming we have proof. David gestured to the fourth Hierarch's screens, which now displayed comprehensive data about the weapon. The fourth Hierarch has verified our evidence. The weapon exists. The genocide happened, and the weapon is still functional, still dangerous, still waiting beneath the surface of a world that everyone believes is sacred. The sixth Hierarch studied the screens for a long moment. His armored face revealed nothing, but David could see the tension in his stance, the subtle shifting of weight that suggested a warrior preparing for combat. If this is true, the Thrandux said slowly, then the founders were without honor. They built their empire on treachery and murder. Yes, and the Hierarchs who know this secret have perpetuated the dishonor for 12,000 years. Yes, the Thrandux was silent for several long breaths. Then he turned to face the fourth Hierarch directly. You believe this, scholar? I have verified every piece of evidence. The truth is undeniable. And you brought me here because you want my support. You want me to stand against my fellow Hierarchs, to expose this ancient crime, to tear apart the foundation of everything we have built. We brought you here because you value honor above all else, David said. Because we believe you would rather know an uncomfortable truth than live comfortably with a lie. The sixth hierarch laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You understand nothing about honor, human. Honor is not about truth. It is about keeping your word, protecting your people, standing by those who have stood by you. He moved closer, looming over David with predatory intensity. The hegemony has protected my species for 8,000 years. It has given us purpose, allies, a place in the galaxy. You are asking me to betray all of that because of something that happened before my species even achieved spaceflight. We are asking you to make the hegemony worthy of your loyalty. David did not back down. He met the Thrandix's gaze directly. Honor means nothing if it is built on dishonor. The hegemony you serve was created through genocide. Every good thing it has done since then is tainted by that original sin. You can pretend otherwise, or you can help us fix it. Fix it how? By destroying the hegemony entirely? By destroying the weapon. By removing the source of the corruption. David pointed to the screens showing the device beneath Kalos Prime. As long as that weapon exists, it is a threat. Someone will eventually try to use it. The only way to truly protect the galaxy is to eliminate it completely. And you have a plan for this? The fourth hierarch's form shifted. I have artifacts. Fragments of Verith technology recovered over millennia. Some may contain the knowledge needed to disable the weapon, but using them requires resources I do not have access to alone. You want me to provide military support. I want you to help save 30,000 worlds from a weapon that should never have existed. The Thrandix warrior stood in silence for a long time. David could only imagine what calculations were running through his mind. Loyalty versus truth. Security versus honor. The comfortable certainty of the present versus the dangerous possibilities of the future. Finally, the sixth hierarch spoke. The first hierarch has ordered your deaths. The third is organizing the assassins. They plan to make it look like an accident, but they have moved up the timeline. You have perhaps 2 hours before they strike. David felt his blood run cold. How do you know this? Because I was invited to participate. The Thrandix's eyes gleamed with something hard and dangerous. I declined. Killing diplomatic representatives without proper combat is without honor, regardless of what they have discovered. But you did not warn us. I am warning you now. The sixth hierarch turned back to the screens. Show me these artifacts. Show me how you plan to destroy this weapon. If your plan has merit, I will provide what support I can. If it is foolish, I will tell you so and leave you to your fate. The fourth hierarch began displaying the artifacts she had collected. Most were incomprehensible, their functions unknown despite centuries of study. But 3 stood out. A crystal that seemed to contain folded space. A device that emitted frequencies outside normal perception. And a fragment of what appeared to be the same material as the weapon itself. This last piece is key, the fourth hierarch explained. It was recovered from a Verith site 3,000 years ago. We believe it is a control interface designed to interact with the weapon's core systems. Can it shut the weapon down? Elena asked. Unknown. The interface requires a compatible operator, someone who can process information the way the Verith did. The Melodi are the closest match, but even our minds cannot fully comprehend Verith thought patterns. Then how do we use it? The fourth hierarch's form flickered. There may be another way. Humans. Everyone turned to stare at her. Explain, David said carefully. The Verith were not like other species. They did not think in linear sequences or hierarchical structures. Their consciousness was distributed, networked, operating on multiple levels simultaneously. The screens shifted to display brain scans. Human neural architecture is unique among known species. Your brains have unusually high connectivity between regions that other species keep separate. You process information in ways that should not work, but somehow do. You are saying humans think like the Verith? I am saying humans might be able to think like the Verith, with the right interface, with the right training. She paused. I have been studying humanity since you first made contact with the hegemony. Your species fascinates me. You should not be able to do the things you do. Your technology is crude, your resources limited, yet you consistently achieve results that defy probability. We are good at improvising. David said with a slight smile. You are good at connecting things that others keep separate. That is exactly what operating Verith technology requires. The sixth hierarch rumbled impatiently. This is all speculation. We have 2 hours before assassins come for the humans. We need action, not theory. Then let us act. David picked up the control interface fragment. It was warm in his hand, almost alive. We go to Kalos Prime. We access the weapon. And we use this to shut it down or destroy it. The planet is heavily guarded. No unauthorized vessels may approach. Then we get authorization. David turned to the 2 hierarchs. You are members of the ruling council. Surely you have some ability to arrange transport to sacred sites. The 4th and 6th exchanged glances. It would require the presence of at least 3 hierarchs, the 4th said. Any fewer and the Guardians would refuse access. Then we need one more ally. The 2nd hierarch is a being of pure energy. It has no investment in physical power structures. It might be persuaded to join us if we can demonstrate that the weapon poses a threat to all forms of existence. Can you convince it? I can try. But it will take time. We do not have time. Elena pulled out her weapon. The assassins are coming. If we stay here, we die. If we try to reach Kalos Prime without proper authorization, we die. What options do we actually have? The chamber fell silent. David could feel the weight of their situation, pressing down on all of them. They had the truth, they had allies, they even had a plan. But they were out of time, and an alarm began to sound. A low, pulsing tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Security breach, the 4th hierarch announced. Someone is accessing the Chamber of Records. They are early. The 6th hierarch drew a weapon that looked like it could level a building. How many? Screens shifted to show security footage. David counted 12 armored figures moving through the corridors outside, their weapons drawn, their formation professional. 12. Elite guard training. They are not here to capture. Then we fight our way out. The Thrandux moved toward the door, every line of his body radiating violent intent. Humans, stay behind me. Scholar, find us an escape route. There is another way. The 4th hierarch's form was shifting rapidly, processing possibilities. I can activate the chamber's emergency protocols. Seal us in. Buy time for me to contact the 2nd hierarch. For how long? Hours, perhaps days. The chamber was built to withstand siege. The 6th hierarch considered this for a heartbeat. Do it. The doors sealed. The walls seemed to shimmer as ancient defensive systems activated. Outside, David could hear the muffled sounds of the assassins trying to breach their position. They were trapped. But they were alive. Contact the 2nd hierarch, David said. Convince it to help us. We will hold here as long as necessary. The 4th hierarch nodded and began reaching out through channels David could not perceive. The 6th hierarch positioned himself at the door, ready for anything that might break through. Elena checked her weapon and took up a defensive position, and David held the Verith control interface in his hands, wondering if a human mind could really operate technology built by a species that had been erased from existence. 12,000 years ago, that there was only one way to find out. The siege had begun. The siege lasted 18 hours. David spent most of that time learning to interface with the Verith control device. It was not easy. The technology was designed for minds that processed reality differently than any species currently alive. Every time he thought he understood something, the device would shift, revealing new layers of complexity that made his head ache and his vision blur, but slowly, impossibly. He began to make progress. "You are doing something the device was not designed for," the fourth hierarch observed, watching his neural patterns on her screens. "You are forcing connections through sheer determination." The Verith would have considered this crude. "I find it fascinating. Is it working?" "You are achieving partial interface. Perhaps 40% compatibility. Enough to read basic functions. Whether it will be enough to operate the weapon's shutdown protocols." She flickered. "Unknown." Outside the chamber, the assassins had brought in heavy equipment. The walls shook periodically as they attempted to breach the ancient defenses. Each impact sent dust falling from the invisible ceiling, a reminder that their sanctuary was not infinite. "Any word from the second hierarch?" Elena asked. "She is considering our proposal. The second is ancient, older than most species in the hegemony. She does not make decisions quickly. We may not have time for her to think about it." As if in answer, the walls shook more violently than before. Something cracked. A seam appeared near the door, glowing with the heat of cutting tools. "They are breaking through," the sixth hierarch announced. He hefted his weapon. "Perhaps 10 minutes before they have a breach large enough for entry." David looked down at the control interface in his hands. 40% compatibility. It would have to be enough. When they break through, I need a distraction. Something that will buy me time to finish establishing the connection. What kind of distraction? Chaos, noise, anything that keeps them focused on something other than me. The sixth hierarch bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. "Chaos I can provide." The crack widened. Through the gap, David could see armored figures preparing to storm the chamber. These were not ordinary guards. They were elite killers, sent by hierarchs who had murdered entire species to protect their secrets. "Now," David said, and closed his eyes. The chamber erupted into violence. The sixth hierarch met the first attackers at the breach, his massive form blocking the gap while his weapon discharged again and again. The fourth hierarch activated defense systems that had not been used in millennia, filling the air with energy fields and confusion. Elena fired precise shots at anyone who got past the Thrandux's guard. David heard none of it. He was somewhere else, somewhere inside the Verith interface, pushing his consciousness into patterns it was never designed to assume. The device resisted. It did not want to be used by a human. But David had spent his entire life forcing himself into situations where he did not belong, learning skills that came naturally to others, achieving through stubbornness what others achieved through talent. He pushed harder. Connections began to form. Not the elegant pathways the Verith would have created, but crude, forceful links that burned through the device's resistance. David could feel his mind stretching, reaching, becoming something it had never been before. And then, suddenly, he was through. The weapon on Kalos Prime appeared in his consciousness like a vast, dark presence. He could feel its power, its age, its terrible purpose. It had been sleeping for 12,000 years, dreaming of destruction, waiting for someone to wake it up. But he was not here to wake it. He was here to end it. David began searching through the weapon systems, looking for shutdown protocols, for self-destruct sequences, for anything that would let him destroy this abomination permanently. What he found instead was a message. The message was old. Older than the hegemony, older than any civilization currently existing. It was from the Verith themselves, left in the weapon's core systems for whoever finally achieved access. We built this to create, not destroy. We built this to reshape reality, to make new things possible. But we knew that others would see it differently. We knew that fear would turn our greatest achievement into a weapon. If you are reading this, then we are gone. The weapon has been used against us, and we have been erased from existence. But we left this message because we believed that someday someone would come who understood, someone who wanted to use our technology for its true purpose. The weapon cannot be destroyed. It exists outside normal causality. Any attempt to eliminate it will only free it from its current constraints. But it can be transformed. It can be restored to its original function. If you have the courage to try, the choice is yours. David felt the weight of that choice pressing down on him. Destroy the weapon and risk making things worse. Transform it and risk something even more unpredictable. Or do nothing and leave the threat intact for future generations. Around him, the battle was reaching its climax. The sixth hierarch was wounded, but still fighting. Elena had run out of ammunition and was using her weapon as a club. The fourth hierarch's defenses were failing one by one. They were losing. David made his decision. He reached into the weapon's core, not trying to destroy it, but to change it. He poured his consciousness into the ancient systems, using his crude human connections to reshape pathways that had not been touched in 12 millennia. He felt resistance, felt the weapon's defensive protocols trying to stop him. But he pushed through with the same determination that had gotten him this far. The weapon began to change. Its destructive potential was redirected, transformed, repurposed. What had been designed to erase became something that created. What had been used for genocide became something that could build. The transformation was not complete, would probably never be complete, but it was enough. The weapon was no longer a threat. It was a tool waiting to be used properly. David opened his eyes. The chamber was in ruins. Bodies lay everywhere, both attackers and defenders. The sixth hierarch knelt against a wall, bleeding from a dozen wounds, but still alive. The fourth hierarch's form was dim and fragmented. Elena was standing over him protectively, a captured weapon in her hands. "It is done," David said. His voice sounded strange, distant. "The weapon is neutralized. It can never be used for destruction again." "How?" The fourth hierarch asked weakly. "I changed it, turned it back into what it was supposed to be." David looked down at the control interface in his hands. It was dark now, its energy spent. The Verith left instructions. They knew this day would come. Footsteps approached the breach. More figures appeared, but these were not attackers. Leading them was a being of pure energy, blazing with light that filled the ruined chamber. The second hierarch had arrived. "I have reviewed the fourth's evidence," the ancient being announced. Its voice was like thunder and birdsong combined. "I have witnessed this battle. I have seen humans risk everything to protect beings they have never met." It moved closer to David. "And I have felt the weapon transform. What was once a threat to all existence is now something else entirely. Something new. Does this mean you will support us?" David asked. "It means I believe the truth must be told. The hegemony's founding must be acknowledged for what it was. And then we must build something better from the ashes of that acknowledgement." The fourth hierarch's form brightened slightly. 3 hierarchs in agreement. Enough to call an emergency session. Enough to override the first's authority. Enough to change everything, the sixth hierarch added, climbing painfully to his feet. 12 hours later, David stood before the Grand Assembly once more. This time he was not alone. 3 hierarchs stood with him, presenting evidence that could not be denied, testimony that could not be dismissed. The story of the Verith genocide was told in full, along with the transformation of their weapon into something that might actually benefit the galaxy. The reaction was everything they had feared and hoped. Anger, denial, grief, and finally, reluctantly, acceptance. The hegemony's founding myth was destroyed, but in its place, something new began to grow. A truth, painful but honest. A foundation for real unity, built not on lies, but on acknowledgement of past crimes and commitment to doing better. The first and third hierarchs were removed from power. Investigations began into 12,000 years of cover-ups. And humanity, the species that had started all of this by trespassing on sacred ground, was invited to take a permanent seat on the council. We did not want power, David told the assembly in his final address. We wanted truth. We wanted accountability. We wanted to build relationships based on honesty rather than convenient fictions. That is what humanity offers the hegemony. Not military might, not technological advantage, but a commitment to facing reality as it is, no matter how uncomfortable. It was not a perfect ending. The transformation of galactic politics would take generations. Old wounds would reopen. New conflicts would emerge. Nothing would be easy, but it was a beginning. A real beginning, built on truth instead of lies. As David left the assembly hall for the last time, Counselor Torvex appeared beside him. You actually did it, the Valenti said. Against all probability, you actually changed everything. We had help. You had courage. Everything else followed from that. Torvex smiled that too-sharp smile. The galaxy will remember this day, Ambassador. The day humans arrived to declare war on lies and won. David looked up at the stars visible through the station's transparent ceiling. Somewhere out there, Earth waited. His family waited. A future waited that would be shaped by what had happened here. We did not declare war on anyone, he said quietly. We just refused to let the truth stay buried. Sometimes that is enough. He walked toward the docking bay, toward the ship that would take him home. Behind him, the hegemony was transforming. Ahead of him, new challenges waited. But for now, in this moment, there was only the simple satisfaction of having done what was right, of having looked at impossible odds and refused to back down. That was what humans did, what they would always do, and the galaxy would never be the same.